Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. And as the thumbnail would likely have shown you, this is a video where I'm going to take a Great Unclean one and a Warhound Titan and mash them together. Kind of. Now this started several years ago when I had a Warhound Titan. You might have seen it on the channel, gone out of the collection now, using it in a big game. And we were talking about how in Nurgle really is a fast, agile Warhound Titan, really what Nurgle would end up with. Now since then I've done a Demon Army, and since then I've done this Demon Prince you're seeing here, and these two things have inspired this kind of build. Now this is a build I've talked about in the background of the channel quite a lot, and I have tried various different ways of making this model over the years. I think I've found the right way. It's still in progress, it's still in build. This is not going to be a finished video, so you're going to see the work in progress, but I think it is going to work this time. So I'm revealing it. Here we go. Now you seem to start off with, it is kind of inspired by obviously the Great Unclean one, and what we're trying to do here is make a Warhound Titan sized Great Unclean one. So literally taking some rough measurements, this is 4.5mm aluminium rod, and this is what's going to form the structure to hold the weapons, because you'll see in a minute I've got the weapons from a Warhound Titan, which were spare weapons, extra weapons for my Warhound that I had, that I only ever did the two weapons that come with the Warhound, never did any extras. So again, this has been in the planning for quite a long while. So this is going to form the framework to hold it. The actual body of the Titan is going to be made of this. This is wire mesh. I just bought a wire mesh sheet. What you can see me here is doing rough measurements off a Great Unclean one and scaling it up, because a Warhound Titan is about 12 inches tall. The Great Unclean one is about sort of 6 inches, a bit shorter tall. So it's kind of roughly scaling the model up. So here I'm just making a belly plate. So literally measured the sort of size of the belly, how far it is across, etc. And I've folded an interesting belly plate. Then I'm sort of scaling the belly, and I've already measured the arms and how tall where the arm sockets are, bending these rods to be holding the weapons that are going to eventually go, and kind of starting testing it. Now what I'm going to be fixing it to is a 12-inch cutting board, so literally a chopping board just from a homeware store. Gone and got that. That's what I'm going to be attaching it to. Now it's time to make the body. So I've cut again a panel, fastened it together with some thin wire at the back there, you can see, so it's made basically a tube. Now it's just folding and bending the tube to make a rough body shape, and the more we go, the more we'll bend and we'll twist and whatever. Now when I was filming this, I lost a lot of the film from this part here, so you're going to go from a tube to a kind of half-finished metal framework, which you'll see shortly. But you can see here, it's relatively easy to bend around. You can scratch yourself and stuff on it, so do be a little bit careful, obviously. But at this stage, it's a relatively safe material to use. When you cut it, it's when it starts getting a bit scratchy. So you'll see here, I pushed and bended and pushed in that tube. You might also see that I've made two little kind of tubular leg shapes to go on the side, and I've also made a kind of blob of mesh to be the head. Now the little paint pot on the back there is holding up the back end because it's not stuck down, because again I wanted the front sort of stuck to the base, the back raised up from the base like you'll see in a Great Unclean one. And then it's about pushing the arms into that plastic, into the metal rather, so we know where we're going. Now quick dig out of the drill and drill a couple of holes into the base. Be very careful if you're doing this, if you're not used to, electronic, obviously, you don't need to tell me about safety, but just be careful when you're doing any of this, obviously, because there is a danger to injure yourself when you're doing it. So really do try and take every precaution when you are going for it. So again, 2 holes drilled in the base for the aluminium rod to go into, to give an extra bit of strength, so we know this model is kind of sealed down. So by now, at this point, we're getting a rough idea of the structure of the model, and it is a scaled up Great Unclean one, as we're seeing at the moment, with some variabilities. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly the same, and it's all going to be a bit slapdash, as you would expect. Now what I want to do here is fill the internal frame of this model with just some spare bits of rolled up wire to give it a little bit more strength and structure for how we're going to make it sort of a bit more solid later on. So literally making a number of rolls of wire, pushing them inside, so it's basically a wire filled structure, which is why it's quite hard to actually show what it looks like at the moment. Now, Milliput, not sponsored by them, wish I was, because I'm probably going to use an awful lot of it in this build. Now, so mixing up some Milliput, and that's really to build the secondary weapon you're going to see in a second. So you see one of the Titan weapons in the background. So we're building for the weapons, but more importantly first, we're using it to stick down the metal framework. So when we're putting the armature, you don't call it an armature, but maybe it is, when we're putting this down, it needs to be sealed to the base. Yes, you could drill it, you could pin it, you could whatever. I'm choosing to use Milliput because it works quite well. So a couple of blobs where the holes are for the arms that are going to go in. So we've pushed them into there, and then I'm literally using blobs of Milliput to push into where this wire mesh is touching the base. And you can also see there where I've put the belly kind of plate that I did, how it's folded onto the tube of metal, and I've put it on with little bits of sort of wire and tied it together. Also that's giving a little bit more structure, so hopefully as we're going through you can sort of see how I've constructed this kind of armature frame idea. Now sealing it down with milliput is something I've done before. I've used the base that it's on. This is a 12-inch cutting board. I've used that on a couple of Warhound Titans, a couple of Reaver Titans, various other things, and generally I've sealed the models down to the base using milliput and using some pins. So you know, I know this is going to kind of work, and there's not going to be a great deal of weight in this model when it's done because we're going to fill it with filler, you'll see later. So it's not a super heavy model, and I did want to avoid any excess weight. So you can see the areas we've kind of pinned down with quite a lot of milliput, and now really I'm just testing the weapons and the pose of the model. Now this is all very kind of fly by the seat of your pants. There's a rough idea of measurement, there's a rough idea of where it's going, and we've roughly sculpted it to look like a Great Unclean one. But it is kind of, as you go in, just play and think, oh, is that looking right, is it not? Now I do cut down the arms a little bit more when we mount the weapons, just to be important. So the inspiration again was from seeing the Great Unclean one, and then this Demon Prince. I thought that's a brilliant weapon. So this is just literally a coffee can, and then I'm cutting a hole into the back of the mesh here and pushing the can in and using again those little bits of metal that's sticking out to hold the can in place. So really it's kind of going to sort of hold it in, and then when we use the filler and stuff in a bit, it's going to hold it in really securely. I did however take a big piece of wire. Now this is just garden wire. Took a larger piece of wire, wrapped it around the can just to kind of hold it in, just in case, because I was more worried about it being pushed out of the model when we come to use the filler. So how I'm fixing it all together, it's a bit more detail here on the arm where you can see it. When I cut it, the area that I'm sort of not going to attach to anything at the moment, I cut it flat and keep the sort of straight edge. You can see the area that I need to use to attach, hopefully you can see there, I leave the sort of individual little prongs there, and I can then use them to wrap around the metal, kind of use a pair of pliers or your fingers, bend it around and hold it in place. Now the armature is not going to be the load bearing thing, but it is kind of going to give extra strength underneath the kind of filler and stuff we're going to use later. So yeah, the filler idea and how we're building this is very different to what I've done over the last couple of years. I've done a number of experiments in the background, not really shown it ever, because I'm, you know, learning how to sort of do it. A lot of failures, a lot of things were in there, and I hope this way is going to work. And I think it should do. So the weapons, again, these are spare weapons. Never got around to doing any extra weapons to my Warhound Titan. So a bit of spares, and again, shows it's been in the background for a while, so cutting them down because I don't want to use the full weapons. The idea is I want this to be like something that's been possessed. This is a Warhound that's been possessed, and this is kind of like its final form being taken over by this giant demon. So having the weapons cut down so that the flesh of the Great Unclean one can be growing over it kind of works well. Now, using milliput to build the weapons, as I said before, and fix the model down, but I'm just doing something here that I've shown in a number of videos actually over the years, where whenever I've got any spare milliput or green stuff or whatever, I'll use them for a number of things. Now here I'm just making little milliput balls of various different sizes to go into the skin of the demon, because if you've ever done Nurgle, you'll know that they have pustules and boils and things, and it is literally a simple circle. So doing that, I also use excess milliput and green stuff for putting into moulds, because I've got tons of moulds of different things on the channel. You'll see I do a lot of blue stuff casting of parts, and you will see that a lot in the future of the build. So pushing that fuel tank into an area where I've cut a hole inside. So you've seen how I did the coffee can. I've mounted the fuel tank of the flamer in the same way, and then I'm just cutting some holes either side of the model so that we've got these kind of pits going into it, because I've got something interesting that I want to have bursting out of those areas. Hopefully it'll work later on. Cutting a hole across the belly here as well to have the kind of teeth or guts or something coming out later on to really replicate what a Great Unclean one does. Now, one of the things I'd come up to, obviously, as we're doing this, is the challenge of getting this model right for the size and etc. And a source of inspiration to sort of get it right kind of has been Midwinter Minis, if you've ever seen that. Obviously I had the idea before him, I will claim that. Maybe didn't, I don't know. I had this a few years ago before he started doing his Titan, but it's been great to watch how he's done his Titan. And his is a Warlord sized one, so it's much, much different to this. And he's building it actually as a Great Unclean one. Now, one of the challenges they came up against was the hands. How do you make the hands look good? And they've done 3D printing and stuff on their recent video. Looks excellent. I've not had that problem because, again, I was never going to be able to do that, and that was something I did think about when we first started this discussion as a bunch of mates. Because I'm building it as a Warhound Titan, I've got the weapons from the Warhound, so he doesn't actually have any hands, so I've avoided the problem that obviously Guy and Hattie from Midwinter Minis had. But shout out to those guys, because watching those videos I'm not doing it in the same way, and I'm doing it quite different actually in some ways, but certain sources of inspiration have definitely helped, although this is going to be about half the size of their Titan. So yeah, bit of a shout out there. So it is nice to see that, in the wargaming community, everyone can have similar ideas and approach it in a slightly different way, but also take inspiration from each other. I've definitely taken patches of inspiration from kind of the work they've done. Whilst being said, there's some different pieces, so looking forward to seeing their finished one, and it very nearly is. And hopefully mine will match up to the standard in some fashion. So now it's time to fill it. Now this is expanding foam. You are really supposed to use gloves when you do this in an environment, etc. So I'm being a bit silly, but if you're doing it yourself, take all safety precautions, please. But all I'm doing is using this filler, squirting it into strategic positions around the model to fill this framework, seal everything together and give it some structure. I have seen actually online a couple of people have done entire Titans with expanding foam and weapons, and done very much like more of a mechanical Titan with bits of mutation. Not quite doing that. And again, in this, I do put too much foam in. Now, it holds its general structure. I think the metal keeps it rough and about, but around the back it went a little bit wrong, and in some areas I put a bit too much in, and ironically the right arm not enough because I ran out of foam. So you will see me fix that later on. It's held really solidly, but there's lots of areas that are just far too big and bulging out from where I wanted it. I really actually like how the belly ends up, and I quite like how the head has gone. It's not gone to the same place as I would, but it needs a lot of cutting down. So this is really easy. This is just a bit of fun, this bit actually. Get a knife, popping parts out, chopping it down. And again, you could recommend that you wear gloves doing this part, because some people can be allergic to expanding foam. Luckily, I'm not one of those. And what I do use as well is liquid gloves. If you've ever seen that, it's basically like a cream that you put on your hands, and it puts a barrier on there. So liquid gloves can be a friend when you're doing this kind of thing. But yeah, cutting it down now with a knife, being quite careful. This has been allowed to set for about 48 hours, I believe I let it set for. It sets much quicker than that, but I just wanted to be extra sure because there were some big sort of blocky areas, and I didn't want to come across any wet, gooey stuff, because when it's wet and gooey, this stuff can be horrible. Now you'll see there, you sort of carved a lot of the belly around. You'll see the hole that's cut inside there. And I then did go and buy myself another can of expanding foam and just filled that right arm, because I wasn't too happy with filling it with modelling clay or something like that for the space, and I wanted to keep the weight down. So put a bit of extra expanding foam on, and you know what, I wish I'd put some wire rod inside these little bits, because the bits where the goo was dribbling off looked brilliant, but it would have been too weak to actually use in the end model, because this stuff you can snap off quite easily. So carving down the final effect and really playing as I go around to try and get the shape into a shape that I'm happy with. And this is kind of where we're going to finish this video number one. So we've got the basic structure of the Titan, we've built the internal armature, covered it in this expanding foam, and then carved it down to have a rough shape. So now we've got the rough shape of a Titan, we've got the weapon arms coming out, and we've got the rough pose of how it's going to be. There's an awful lot of work still to do on this, as you can see, but we now have the basic structure of what I hope will continue to be a workable build. It might not. This might go horribly wrong. I might be showing something on the channel that in a year or two I'll be thinking, oh, why did I show that? That was terrible. But I think it's going to work. There's a lot of work to do, and I've got a fairly short amount of time to get it done over the next sort of 2-3 weeks. So hopefully it'll keep progressing. Hopefully it'll go well. Again, hopefully you enjoyed that video. Any questions, that kind of stuff below, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you again.